Tired of bloating, fatigue and sluggish digestion? Meet your gut's new best friend, NutriHealth 365's microbiome supplement. Restore balance, boost immunity, and feel amazing from the inside out. Smart delayed release capsules, real results. Gut health just got personal.
Good morning, you wonderful, iconic people, and welcome to this morning's episode of Trending. Today, we're going to be talking about a manhunt in the UK as another prisoner is accidentally released. YouTube deletes 700 videos that show evidence of Israeli war crimes, and Google are going to launch an AI health platform. What could possibly go wrong? Welcome to this morning's episode of Trending, brought to you in association, as always, with NutriHealth 365. The link is in the description below. Let's start with more madness, because why not? Do you know what I mean? It's Thursday. Manhunt for foreign prisoner after mistaken release from Wandsworth prison. Okay. Another foreign prisoner is on the run after being mistakenly released, Sky News has learned. The error at HMP Wandsworth in South London happened on the 29th of October, just 5 days after the high-profile release of migrant sex offender Hadush Kabatu from Chelmsford in Essex. Seems legit. It's also 2 days after Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary and 10-watt light bulb David Lammy announced enhanced checks on prisoner releases. It's going well then. Were there enhanced checks on the 40,000+ prisoners that were released earlier? You know, the ones they released to make way for people that sent spicy tweets. I wonder if they were checked. The Metropolitan Police confirmed to Sky News shortly after 1 p.m. on Tuesday the 4th of November, the Met was informed by the prison service that a prisoner had been released in error. Careless, isn't it? From HMP Wandsworth on Wednesday, the 29th of October. Hang on. Nearly a week later. So nearly a week after you've accidentally released a criminal with a history of sex offences, you wait the best part of a week to let the police know that actually, oh God, you might want to try and find this geezer. The prisoner is a 24-year-old Algerian man. It always is, isn't it? Although I was going to ask the question, actually. Bearing in mind, there's something like 88,000 people in UK prisons as we speak, round about that figure. Why is it never Steve who's in prison for insurance fraud that's been released accidentally? Doesn't seem to happen. Well, people started asking that question. Then suddenly they announced that, oh, actually, no, we did. We accidentally released another guy. Less bothered about him, though. Officers are carrying out urgent inquiries in an effort to locate him and return him to custody. Sky News understands the prisoner was serving time for trespass with an intent to steal, but had previously committed sexual offences. Nice guy, then. They are laughing at us, ladies and gentlemen. I think they actually are. I know that sounds like a flippant comment, like you throw it away, don't you? Oh, they're laughing at us. I think they actually are laughing, whilst quaffing champagne, no doubt, at our expense. It's obviously coordinated. I make the joke about this clearly being a legitimate mistake. Of course it's not. Of course it's not. It's something that's going to, lead to, and already is, let's have it right, leading to calls for a complete overhaul. We need an overhaul of the prison service and of the justice system and of, the way that prisoners are checked and released and X, Y, and Z. That overhaul will be AI, of course, because, AI is being injected into the veins of the United Kingdom, isn't it? It's also another way of removing humans from the game. So if you look at, even supermarkets and stuff like that, we talk about it all the time on the show in terms of automating everything, making everything done by computer and AI and facial recognition and X, Y, and Z, because you can't have a conversation with that. So the less humans around, the more machines you've got to deal with, then, as I've said previously, in the case of Little Britain, which was meant to be a comedy but wasn't overly funny, computer says no. Sorry, computer says no. And that's the point. You can't reason with a computer like you can with a human. Come on, mate. So they want more stuff automated and less humans. And they've already done it with the previous release down in Essex of that guy. What's his name again? Let me find his name again. Hadush Kabatu, that's it. They blamed human error with him. I think it was a couple of people at the prison. Oh, yeah, they got it wrong. How careless, isn't it? But if we didn't have humans doing it, well, we'd be all right, wouldn't we? They'll almost certainly do the same with this Algerian guy when they eventually catch him, if they eventually catch him, and if he hasn't committed another crime, maybe a violent one or another sexual crime before they do catch him, because that will really help, won't it, in terms of sowing fear in the public, which is of course what they want. Another part of it, in terms of this big overhaul, and I've mentioned this before on the show, ladies and gentlemen, is I keep saying ladies and gentlemen. My wife said to me the other day, she said, "You're saying ladies and gentlemen way too much." I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. But what they tend to do is try and introduce stuff that they want for the wider society, but there might be pushback against. They introduce it to certain demographics that no one really cares about. No one has any skin in the game for. So no one's going to be marching on the streets of London or wherever saying prisoners shouldn't have facial recognition in prison. Prisoners shouldn't need digital ID to make sure that they don't get released accidentally. Down with that, holding a placard. Ain't no one doing that. And the example that I've given a few times previously, so forgive me for sounding like a broken record, but when they started spraying that DNA spray that takes months to wash off so they could test it to make sure that people weren't going into football matches when they weren't supposed to, no one said anything about how frickin' Orwellian and dystopian and freaky that is, the mark of the beast, because it's football hooligans. No one cares about them. No one's bothered. No, again, no one's marching on the streets with down with bullying football hooligans. No one's doing that. So they bring these things in for the undesirables, and then it becomes normalized. And once it's in and can be used and then, exampled as, well, we did it in the prisons and it worked great. And then people go, oh, well, yeah, if it's worked in the prisons, then I suppose it's probably fine. Another element of it, which I touched on a second ago, is fear. It's all about fear. Everything's about fear. Because if people are frightened, they're more suggestible. So you've got a situation in the UK, and it's not a coincidence. As soon as Starmer's announced digital ID is going to be introduced, and they've already started building the infrastructure around us already, massively down the line with that already, suddenly we've had more things to be frightened about. So more terrorist attacks, and I've touched on it previously, coming from different demographics, because the idea is to see everyone as a plausible threat and everyone as a plausible victim. Therefore, everyone's frightened of each other. And the more we're frightened of each other, the more we're distrusting of each other. Unfortunately, the more we look to authority to govern us harder and help me, please. I don't want to give you all my freedoms and all my money, but if you keep me safe, then I'll do it. So that's what they do in various different ways. And I've touched on that in my monologue on yesterday's Gareth Tonight show. That, you could even include climate change with that. Give us all your money, give us all your freedoms and all that stuff, because otherwise the planet's going to go whoosh and we're all going to die. So you go, all right, yeah, fine, I don't want to, but yeah, net zero seems like a really bad idea, but if it stops the world blowing up, then yeah, fine. Stick solar panels that don't work all over those fertile fields that we should be growing food on. Yeah, do it. That's fine, because otherwise, we're all going to go up in a fireball. So you want fear. So what do? Well, you let so many people into the country, tens and tens and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people, that we don't know anything about. We don't know who they are. We don't know what their story is. We don't know what they're fleeing. Because, you'll have one side. See, this is the problem with the polarity of it. You'll have one side that make out that all of these people are fleeing war and persecution. Really? Were they facing that in France, were they? and that they just want to come here for a better life. And yes, they accidentally left the wife and kids at home, but they're still going to come here and they're going to be doctors and engineers. And the other side says, no, they're all coming here, they're all terrorists, and they're all going to come and blow us to smithereens. Of course, neither of those things overwhelmingly are true. The most part will be the grey area. But, you know, there are people, of course, that are coming for a better life, and there are people that are coming for nefarious motives, of course. So you allow all these people in, which will include that side of people that are, you know, up to no good, and maybe are not necessarily fleeing persecution for their religious beliefs or their ethnicity or whatever, but are maybe fearing a prison cell for committing sexual crimes or whatever, and are running away from that. So you've brought all these people into the country. You don't know where they are. They get stuck in hotels at the taxpayers' expense, and then farmed out across the country, which is happening more and more as they close down hotels. Then these people get farmed out into the towns and eventually into the villages. Well, not even eventually into the villages. They're already being moved into the villages. Now, there's websites set up so we can find out where they are, what towns have migrant hotels, what villages migrants are housed in. These websites are an absolute waste of frickin' space, because I've gone and checked in my area where I know there are, because there's been media coverage of protests outside these hotels. Some of the people that have been in those protests, I've looked on the photos and recognised, oh, I know him. Because someone within one of those hotels committed a sexual assault. In the case near me, it was on a 14-year-old girl. So I know that that's happened, and I know that it's there. Yet you go on these websites, where are they? Oh no, there's nothing in my area. But I know there is. So they're in more different areas. We don't necessarily know where they are until something like that happens. And then, of course, we're well and truly alerted to it. So that's frightening, isn't it? I'm always looking over my shoulder. Something's going to need to be done to keep us safe, isn't it? Because you've got all these people coming into the country, you don't know who they are. Could be anyone. You've got 40,000 plus prisoners being released early so that they can get, do you know what I mean, people in for thought crimes and speech crimes. And then now they're accidentally releasing criminals as well. Goodness me. So even if they come over here illegally and commit a crime and get arrested and sentenced and put in prison, we're still not safe because the buggers might accidentally let them out. Well, I'm terrified then. I need the government to introduce something to make sure this doesn't happen. And I don't know what that could be. If anyone could think of something, answers on a postcard. Now, I sat here probably 6 months ago, I reckon, and I said what I'd been looking at in terms of what the Labour government were doing, and the Tories before them, let's have it right, because they're two cheeks of the same backside, we know that, or at least some of us still remember that. But I started looking at what they were doing, and I was like, do you know what? If I wanted to destroy a country, what would I do? Because I get the feeling that they're doing this. So what would I do? And I made a list of the things that I would do if I came to power with the sole purpose of destroying a nation for my true masters, right? So I went in with that mindset. And I started writing a list of stuff. And I was then checking it against basically everything that the Labour government and the Conservative government before them had been doing. I was like, these two are exactly the same thing. In terms of, you know, destroying energy infrastructure, in terms of destroying the food supply, in terms of making stuff unaffordable, in terms of opening the borders and disenfranchising and demoralizing the natives, those that would be more patriotic and therefore would stand up to me. I would bring in free speech, crackdown laws and hate speech laws to basically then silence and even imprison those that do stand up to me. And then part of what I said as well was I'd let violent criminals out of prison. I mean, I'd make up an excuse for it. I'd say, oh, it's overcrowded and it's this, it's that. You know, of course it's overcrowded. You're putting people in prison for nothing a lot of the time. I'd let out tens of thousands of violent criminals and just send them out into the country. so that they will, by their very nature, because they're violent criminals, will commit crime, and often violent crime, which is exactly what happened. And I think it was something like 3 out of 5 of the people that were released ended up being recalled to prison within the first, I think, month for committing crimes yet again. But I do that because, yes, the crimes and all that sort of stuff would be bad, but also the fear. It would sow fear, which is understandable. I'm not digging people out for being frightened. If you're living in a local community and suddenly your community has known violent criminals walking around again, that's gonna make you concerned, especially if you've got kids. You're like, what? So I would do that, and I would do whatever I could do to create chaos, because it's the oldest trick in the book, right? Order out of chaos. And so then you look at what, the intelligence agencies, the CIA, Mossad, British intelligence historically as well, and currently, let's have it right, have done in terms of trying to overthrow and topple governments, whether in Africa, whether in the Middle East, whether in Eastern Europe, whatever, whether in South America. That's exactly what they do. They have agent provocateurs within these nations that create chaos. They create chaos on the streets and chaos in society that then they can go, oh, mate, we need to do, something must be done about it. We need to do something. Yes, okay, we'll do this. Oh, did you have that prepared earlier? That's convenient. Yeah. And that's exactly what I think we're seeing here. Because there's no mistake that as soon as this digital ID plan was announced, and as I say, is already being built around us, that suddenly we start seeing criminals accidentally being released. And there seems to be quite a lot of reports, although they're conflicting at times, because certain people are reporting it, then denying it. So I don't know the actual 100% truth, but there is a lot being reported about the fact that the Afghan migrant that stabbed the gentleman in London, in Uxbridge, killed the guy, was part of that 40,000 plus people that were released early from prison. Now, like I say, the BBC were saying it, then they weren't saying it. I know Unity News Network are all over it. They're saying that basically the reason the mainstream media is now saying it's not the case is because it's cover-up. Could well be. Wouldn't surprise me if he was one of those 40,000 people that were released early. Because you release a violent criminal into society. Well, not only that, you release tens of thousands of criminals out into society. What do you think is going to happen? I mean, some of them will go, oh, mate, I've learned from my mistake. It was horrible in prison. Didn't want to be there. Right, I'm out. I'm going to behave. Some might do that. Some will probably definitely do that, actually. Not all of them, mate. And they would know that. And they're playing on those averages. Because the government and the establishment, the permanent government that they represent, because they don't represent us, obviously, they want this chaos and they don't care about any of us. They don't care about Britain and British people. Just like the American government don't care about America and American people. They couldn't care less. And this is, that's a Rubicon that people struggle to cross because people have an attitude of they wouldn't do that. And as I always say, no, you wouldn't do that. It's not the same thing. What you wouldn't do isn't the same as what they wouldn't do. And so I imagine we're going to see more of this. And I keep making this point in different shows on Iconic and videos and stuff that I'm making when I'm out and about, that they want this chaos. So you're going to see more and more of this madness. And it won't just be, Algerians and Afghans and whatever. They will start to blame attacks on, they've already done it with the train in Cambridgeshire, where they blamed it on a mental health issue. The stabbing, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, in Uxbridge, you've got a guy of Afghan descent. You've got this guy now on the loose, still on the loose, of Algerian descent. You've got the synagogue attack in Manchester. All these things have come along after the announcement of the intention for a mandatory digital ID. That's not a coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. It's not. And I imagine, as I said earlier, they want every demographic to be a potential target, and they want every demographic to be a potential perpetrator, to be feared. Because it's all well and good, focusing on one particular demographic. It's the migrants, it's the Muslims, whatever. But you can't justify a wholesale rollout of something to target one specific group, because people will say, well, hang on a minute. Why do I need that? I was born here. I've never committed a crime. I've never been to prison. I don't need that then. Give it to them, fine, but not for me. But they don't want it just for them, because everyone is in the gun sights, no matter how much we're bickering amongst ourselves, unfortunately. So they need to create a situation where we fear every single person. I'm terrified of Muslims. I'm terrified of migrants. I'm terrified of people with mental health problems. I'm terrified of the far right. I'm terrified of these woke leftist gender ideology, blue air extremists. I'm terrified of them. I'm terrified of veterans that have come back from war zones, because they've ticking time bomb, mate. See what I mean? Everyone is to be feared, and everyone is to be in fear. And I think we're just going to see more and more of it, and that's why it's so important for us to be streetwise with that and look at situations. And I'll be honest with you, most people are. Most people aren't looking at these accidental releases and going, oh. Most people really are going, really? You being serious? Another one just happens to tick that box. Like I say, Steve, the insurance fraud guy, is not being released, is he? And so that's encouraging. The other encouraged part, just finally, is that they have to pull all this stuff. And I keep saying it, but I think it bears repeating. If they could steamroller over us and introduce everything they wanted, do whatever they wanted, they would, because it'd be a darn sight easier. But they can't. So during the whole, COVID nonsense, they had to have us terrified of this Wu flu, and therefore we would accept these draconian measures because if it just saves one life. If they didn't have to do that and they could just lock everyone in their houses and destroy everyone's, small businesses, they would do that. And they are doing that with the budget, again, almost certainly in terms of taxes. But if you make people frightened, you don't have to take away their freedoms. You don't have to take away their money. They will hand it over willingly and often beg you for it. Just take it. Keep me safe, mate. But like I say, that's encouraging in the sense that they have to do it. Because if they didn't have to do it, they would not, ladies and gentlemen. I said ladies and gentlemen again. Anyway, that's the end of the social media section. I always do that every time. It's the social media section of trending. If you head over to Iconic now, the URL is in the description below. You can continue watching for free.